Hello, good evening and welcome to the Planning Committee for Tuesday the 14th of September. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so we are back in the council chamber this evening and we are suitably socially distanced. The Planning Committee are separated around the room with officers and there are no members of the public in this room. I don't think there are any in the gallery either. Okay, so we have no apologies for absence. I'm not aware of any urgent matters unless anyone's got any. Any declarations of interest?
Chair, I'd probably just better declare my interest as a TfL board member, given that there were some comments from TfL that I'm going to make some comments on as well.
I think we probably should note that for any time you're in, because there'll always be comments from TfL, I would imagine.
Yeah, we don't discuss these matters at TfL board meeting, I have to say, but yeah, it's I think I need to declare it.
Okay. Okay, any matters to be considered in private? I'm not aware of any. Minutes for those that were at the last meeting or those that have got any objections to the minutes in the last meeting. Is it a true record of the minutes in the last meeting?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Site visit attendance. Although we are planning to go back to site visits, and I would have had site visits for this committee, but we felt that site visits wouldn't have actually helped in this case. So we didn't have site visits, but for the next committee, should there be worthy site visits, we will be going back to site visits. Okay. So don't need to detail site visit attendance as we didn't go there. I'm planning to take them in the order on the agenda. We have two items this evening. First one is 2 Sovereign Park Royal. And will the officer now introduce that, please?
Hello, I'm Sean. So I'll be going through the presentation. I'm just going to share my screen now. So let me know if you have any difficulties with hearing me or want anything repeated. Okay, so this application is for 2 Sovereign Park, and it's the change of use from treatment and transfer of waste facility to industrial. And for treatment and transfer of waste, more of that will be in the briefing note. So this is the site location. So it's on the red line on your screen, and it's also in the officer's report. It's located within the Sovereign Park industrial estate, which is accessed from Coronation Road within Park Royal. It is recognised as a major employment location within the OPDC as referenced in their local plan. The site is identified within the West London Waste Plan as an existing waste facility, existing waste management facility, and has a quantity waste limit of 4,999 tonnes, and that's per the Environmental Agency permit. It is recognised as a strategic industrial location. The unit has been vacant since July 2020 when the waste operator relocated to the new facility in Isleworth in the London Borough of Hounslow. There's some reference of that in the officer's report. So this application is for the change of use from transfer and treatment of waste, which is sui generis, to either retention of the treatment and transfer of waste, sui generis, or for the mixed use industrial, which is use class EG, part III, B2 and B8. So underneath on the presentation, you can see a breakdown of what the subcategories mean, which is basically industrial processes, general industrial, or storage or distribution. And it would allow the facility to become any one of these. These are considered in line with the OPDC local plan and the London plan regarding strategic industrial locations. So we've had some consultation during the planning process. More of this is outlined in the officer's report, but we had no public representations. It did go through reconsultation when we got analysis departure from the local plan with a greater coverage of site notices, and there were still no public consultation responses. We have been speaking to a number of bodies for this one, Ealing Policies Team, the GLA, the OPDC, and the West London Waste Authority, who are the statutory body for waste in West London. So there's more of that on Annex C at the back of this report, which outlines the 6 authorities which this body is in charge of. The main confirmation was to make sure that the West London Waste Authority accepted this as a principle, that they were happy with this being a loss, because it'd be contrary to the West London Waste Authority plan, as well as information on transport, fire and sustainable development. And this is referenced in the GLA referral elements of the report. It is noted that the West London Waste Authority did raise no objection to this proposal. So as noted, this site became vacant through the relocation to the London Borough of Hounslow site. So this is in Isleworth, which is the main facility for all 6 boroughs now. This was confirmed through the planning process, and it's a 4 Fleming Way. This is referenced in the report throughout. It is noted that both Hounslow and Ealing are within the remit of West London Waste Authority, and that the environmental permit for the Isleworth new facility, which has been operational now for about 18 months, is for 75,000 tonnes, which is about 15 times the size of this one. So it's about trying to get them all into one facility. The operational categories of the new facility is D14, D15 and R13. There's a bit about this in the officer's report to break down what each one of these means. But the main thing is that these are the same provisions of what this current site is. So therefore it's considered a compensatory provision in line with the West London Waste Plan. So there were some other planning considerations. You should note there's no external changes to this site, to this building. The car parking is going from 10 spaces to 9 plus 1 disabled, and it'll be 2 electric car charging points in line with the London Plan standards. There's no change to the operational hours in terms of what they've been allowed previously, and conditions have been recommended regarding sound insulation and ventilation systems in order to not cause harm to any nearby residents. It is noted that this facility will have improvements to the energy efficiency as outlined in the GLA referral document. And it's expected that this unit could accommodate between 20 and 44 jobs, and that's been confirmed by the agents through the planning process. This is, the 20 to 44 is a variation because it depends on the waste or the industrial use, but a waste use is considered to have a lower amount of jobs than an industrial unit, but this is all roughly in line. So there's been a few changes which are outlined in your briefing note. The description has been amended to include that the facility can still be used as waste. The urban green factor condition has been replaced and removed in line with comments and dialogue from the OPDC and the GLA. This is because classes B2 and B8, the industrial classes, do not require to need to meet the urban greening factor, and this has been confirmed over the past week. So that's why condition 11 has been removed. Instead, condition 12 will be renumbered to condition 11, and this is just to further emphasis the unit to be used for industrial purposes only. So for class EG, it's just going for part III. So if you're on Annex C of the report, it outlines what the use classes are, and it's the last point. Also, TfL have made comments about how they want the car parking reduced from 10 total to 4 total. However, it is noted that the car parking in the original application for the industrial unit many years ago and the change of use of the waste facility did not impact the car parking, and this is staying consistent throughout the time of this development. So by having car parking allows us to see the dedicated spaces and not cause any conflict. So there are the main points. That's the end of the presentation. I'm going to just keep sharing my screen. So if you want me to go back onto anything, just let me know in your questions.
Thank you, Sean. Very comprehensive. Councillor Dabrowski, you indicated first, Councillor Bell second. Just open for questions at the moment.
It's just a clarification. Can you just reiterate about the parking spaces? Because the briefing there, I'm just trying to understand what TfL has put in there and what you've said, and trying to pair it up. And also, I know the change that you're putting in, that the applicant's putting in 2 electrical charging points. Is that expandable if, say, there's a requirement to have or demand to have more? Is the capacity in the proposed infrastructure locally. Thank you.
I'll take Councillor Bell's next.
Yeah, so mine's a similar one. It's slightly contradictory, the report. So under the external consultation table, under the GLA, sorry, not under the GLA, under the section about transport services comments, there's the 4 recommendations of conditions that they transport put forward, and then it says in the officer's response that condition 4 is not recommended as the site is not creating any additional car parking spaces and considered excessive. Obviously, in the body of the report, what you've just said, there are 2 spaces that would have electric charging points, but picking up on Councillor Broska's point, transport are saying, can we have passive electric charging points? I'm not sure what the difference is between passive electric charging points and fixed charging points that we're saying should be in. So it would be helpful for some clarity on that. And I would, given that the government are going to stop the sale of diesel and petrol vehicles in 2030, I think there's an imperative for us as a planning committee to use the planning system to move us towards that transition. And we've been doing this for years, but actually the urgency is even greater now. So it's my feeling that we should do more than 2. But then that brings up my second question, which is about TfL's recommendation. Because of the PTAR rating, this site's bang in the middle of North Acton and Park Royal tube stations. It's a short walk from either one, frankly. And so, again, it does seem that there's no good reason for us not to hear what TfL have recommended in terms of reducing the number of car parking spaces.
Quite long questions, but yes. Any other questions before we go to the officer? Sean.
Okay, so in terms of parking spaces, so we had a GLA referral. We had a GLA stage 1 referral report, and in then they did not, so that would have been in consultation with Transport for London, and in then they did not raise any objections to the number of parking spaces. This comment has only come in light in the last couple of days in terms of the reduction. However, it wasn't referred to, so as well as the applicant not being able to address it because it wasn't told by Greater London Authority, which is part of the reason, but also because of the amount of time the parking's been there, we'd rather have the site designated with proper parking bays that can be controlled with lines, and as well as having a disabled parking provision, which isn't there at the moment. We're adding one, so taking one space away to have a disabled parking space. This is considered to at least be an enhancement to the parking situation in terms of an improvement to be accessible. Regarding the car charging points, it's just noted that in the applicant's cover letter that they're proposing 2, and that is in line with the GLA comments and with the transport services comments in terms of having 2 spaces. So that is part of their approved plans, would be to include that, because that's in a document of the 2. In terms of facilities to have more, we've got to consider that although diesel cars are being phased out and we're having electric, it's not in the London plan policy to have every parking space a electric car charger point at the moment. So the 2 is in line with the current guidance, and it would be up to any future occupier of the site. If they wanted to add more, they could. It's just we're in this application just enforcing just the 2 of them. I don't know if Alex wants to add any more to that.
Alex, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a couple of issues here. Obviously, there's the consideration of the existing car parking as it stands, which I think in the initial stage 1 GLA response was reasonable, accepting obviously that it's a relatively small amount of car parking, and applying obviously the strict London plan requirements was probably not necessary. So that's the first point. I'm also aware that obviously there's a travel plan imposed as well, which will also seek to reduce the demand on car parking for the proposed use. So it is a question of whether it's considered absolutely necessary to reduce the car parking which exists. Obviously, in industrial estates, every square piece of land will be used for car parking for operational purposes, and it doesn't seem unreasonable for that to exist for this particular proposal. And I think that coupled with the travel plan, that would be a reasonable compromise. It is regrettable that these additional comments were received only in the last few days, and also following obviously the issue of the GLA stage 1. So these were new matters. I think we've been quite clear in providing you with that information and what would be acceptable. And then I think just on the point about, Sean's obviously dealt with the issue around the charging points. Obviously, if you had less car parking overall, that would obviously technically reduce. So I think having the ability to secure the active in the first instance is the correct thing to do, and we'll always try and encourage additional passive electric pointing in car parking where it can be secured. But I think we need to consider that in relation to the nature of the planning application, and we are looking at this as a flexible permission which can revert from its existing use or retain the existing use to other industrial uses. So that's the recommendation as it stands.
Councillor Dabrowski, you wanted to come back,
Yes,
or is it a
please.
different
No,
question?
I do want to come back on
Okay.
just a clarification on the capacity. My question was about currently 2 electric points are being proposed. I mean, it's still a question I would ask another development, same principle. For example, because it's based on electricity, for example, if you put like an internet cable into a house, there's no point you putting copper in, because you may in the future want fiber. For example, you put the maximum capacity available or technical capacity. So you put cabling in for electrical points for more. There's no point in putting it just for 2 if we're moving towards sort of the green sort of agenda, moving forward, you should have the capacity, the infrastructure put in, knowing, I'll be very surprised if we don't use electrical points in the future. It's being ready, it's being effectively electrical point ready.
I mean, we cannot predict the future. I mean, we have different ways of charging cars in the future, so they might be redundant by the time we get to 2030, but I'll let the officer.
Yeah, so I'll just add that the requirement is just in line with the current GLA and London Plan standards in terms of parking. And if it comes to a stage where the occupier or the landlord deems that the electric car charging points are required, they would be able to install them in line with planning procedure of that latest time. I will also point out that in condition 6, the travel plan, is a pre-occupation, which means they'll have to submit details for us, and it'll be reviewed by our transport services team in order to ensure that it meets the guidance in terms of using sustainable modes of transport. So I hope that helps to address some of the points.
Councillor Bell. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to come back on this one again. So I'm still struggling to understand the difference between a electric charging point and a passive electric charging point, and whether there's any latitude for us to have the additional parking spaces as specifically electric charging points. And if you're going to choose between less parking spaces or electric charging points, I'd rather go with the electric charging points, I think, because you can address some of those travel issues through the travel plan, as you've rightly said. So in that sense, I'm kind of more wanting to explore the charging point issue. I guess my question is, The London plan says 2, but why can't, you know, surely we can go beyond the London plan. Yeah, it's a minimum requirement that we have to meet, but as a planning authority we could say we want more, surely.
You're absolutely right. Obviously, we can go beyond, and I would suggest to the committee that if they want to impose an additional condition to secure those, the other connections to or provision of electrical charging points, then I would do so. So you can decide whether that is entirely possible.
Am I hearing someone propose that? Okay. With that in mind, and that being the crux of debate so far, are we ready to, has anyone else got any questions, or are we ready to move to the vote on this? Okay. With that condition, sorry, should I vote on the condition? Yes. Okay. So yes, we've got a proposal for its condition. Got a seconder. Actually, we don't need a seconder, but never mind. We'll go to the vote on the condition of provision of electric charging. Can you read that out? What do you think?
The condition will secure all of the car parking spaces to be electric charging points, something along those lines, or the ability to do so. Yeah. Okay.
Alison, that's okay. Okay. With that in mind, on the condition, all those in favour of the condition to be added, please show. Okay, that's unanimous, I think. Just hold your hands up again. Sorry. That's unanimous. So with that in mind, that condition added, I'll go to the vote on this, on the main agenda item. All those in favour of with the condition added. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. Moving on to the old land and buildings to the rear of Red Lion Public House, 94 High Street and 94 High Street, Southall. Ohan, would you like to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. My name is Rowan Graham. I'm here to introduce and take any questions regarding the Section 73 minor material amendment application to the site known as land to the rear of the Red Lion Public House. As you may recall, this site was presented to Council's Planning Committee in July earlier this year and deferred from consideration. As such, this presentation will again provide an overview of the proposal and then focus upon the reasons for deferral. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the subject site. The site, as you can see outlined within red above, is located to the northeast of Southall Railway Station and is located directly adjacent to Southall Park. The site is irregularly shaped and is primarily utilised as a hard stand car parking area. A single-storey shop occupies the northwest corner of the site with a frontage onto Southall High Street. The site is within the Southall Opportunity Area, as well as being within the Southall Town Centre. Vehicular access to the site is from 2 entrances off the High Street. The nearest residential properties are residences on Boyd Avenue to the southwest of the site and upper floor flats on the High Street to the northwest of the site. So the site benefits from an existing planning permission, which sought approval and gained approval for the redevelopment of the site into 149 residential dwellings across 3 buildings. 1 commercial tenancy was approved on the ground floor fronting the High Street. It was reported to the Planning Committee in February 2020, and following the referral to the GLA and agreement to a Section 106, the decision notice was issued in March 2021. The imagery shown on the slides above illustrates the approved scheme. It is noted that no works have commenced on site. So the applicant began the pre-application process with council staff in early 2021 in order to refine the design of the scheme. This led to the preparation and lodgement of this Section 73 minor material amendment application. Specifically, the proposal seeks approval for a minor material amendment relating to design refinements to the massing and facade design, reduction in the size of the commercial unit by 37 square meters, amendment to the mix of residential units to reduce the number of studios and 2-bedroom units and increase the number of 1-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. The reduction in height of Block B by 1.5 floors and increase the height of Block C by 1.5 floors, effectively transferring the height. Relocating the building entrances within Blocks B and C to be accessed directly from the central courtyard. And relocating the cycle storage internally into Blocks B and C from the adjacent private amenity space. Importantly, since the reporting of this application to the July committee meeting, the total number of affordable housing units has increased by 1, up to 41 dwellings in total. Whilst this report has undertaken assessment of the whole proposal, specific consideration has been given to the existing planning permission, and there has been a focus upon the matters proposed to be amended, being those matters listed earlier. So again, similar to last time, I just focus on what a minor material amendment is. Government guidance on minor material amendments do not define what changes may be treated as minor material amendments. As a Section 73 minor material amendment application, the proposal has been assessed against Council's protocol for minor material amendments following a grant of planning permission. This assessment determined that whilst there are differing impacts from the revised building heights, altered materiality, and changes to entrances and cycle storage, none are so materially harmful as to indicate that the application cannot reasonably be treated as a minor material amendment. The applicants began the process with a desire to enhance the overall scheme for this site within a prominent location on the edge of Southall Park. The buildings would be repositioned and massing refined to better respond to the context by increasing the views towards and providing a better backdrop to Southall Park. The buildings would also be more complementary to one another with a more ordered approach and consistent materiality. You can see this revised approach within this imagery. The aim of the revised materiality was a desire to provide a calm, neutral backdrop to Southall Park that would highlight the colour palette visible within the landscape. This was considered by officers to represent an improvement to the varied brick materiality approved previously. The proposal seeks development of a similar scale whilst refining the overall massing of the 2 taller buildings. The revised massing, as shown on the slide above, with the approved on the left-hand side and the proposed on the right-hand side, shows a more coherent design with buildings that sit comfortably together and a more coherent materiality. Blocks B and C have been altered in height, with Block C being increased in height from 12 stories to 14 stories, and the top floor being set back, whilst Building B would be decreased from 15 stories down to 13 stories, with the top floor being set back. This would effectively transfer 1.5 stories from Building B onto Building C. Importantly, it is noted that the maximum height of this site would be lower than previously approved. The elevations shown above compared the elevations of the approved scheme at the top against the proposed elevation at the bottom. Again, these elevations illustrate how the two taller blocks would move away from the patchwork of textures, forms, and heights towards a more coherent design and height. The smaller building, Block A, would remain 4 stories in height, sitting directly adjacent to the Red Lion Public House. As such, this element remains acceptable. In association with the altered building form and footprints, the ground floor layout has been further refined. The ground floor entrances for buildings B and C would be relocated to the central courtyard, which is considered to be a logical design response. These entry points can be seen in point 1 and the red arrows on this imagery above. Cycle storage would be more appropriately located within the buildings themselves, opening up the public domain to public use, and for communal use within the buildings for the buildings themselves, I should say. Lastly, the refined building footprints have allowed for improved linkages through the site. The pedestrian route between the front of the site along Southall High Street and Southall Park to the south has been provided along the western boundary. Overall, the proposal seeks to provide a slightly altered unit mix within the same quantum of overall housing, being 149 residential units. This is largely attributed to the amended building footprint and design. The unit mix continues to provide a range of dwelling types with more 1 and 3 bedroom units provided and less studio and 2 bedroom units. It is considered to remain acceptable. Within this slightly altered unit mix, the proposal has retained the same proportion of habitable rooms as affordable housing, 35%. This calculation will be discussed further in upcoming slides. A slightly altered tenure mix is also proposed, but this change is minor and can be attributed to the revised unit mix and the addition of an additional shared ownership dwelling since the last committee meeting. The GLA have confirmed that given the approved quantum of affordable housing would be maintained, the minor amendment to the tenure mix is not of strategic concern. At the July committee meeting, there were a few points of discussion that led to this application being deferred. Specifically, and please correct me if I am wrong, the main points of clarification required related to the calculation of the total number of habitable rooms, and subsequently, what proportion of those habitable rooms would be affordable housing. This new slide and the table at the top is important in answering the first point as to how the total number of habitable rooms is calculated. This table clearly sets out that the number of habitable rooms in each sets out the proposed number of habitable rooms in each tenure within the first column of each tenure. The second column sets out the total number of units within that specific tenure. And the third column sets out the total number of habitable rooms. These are then added up at the bottom for each specific tenure type. This clearly shows that a total of 422 habitable rooms would be provided across the scheme. The 40 affordable rental habitable rooms and 108 shared ownership habitable rooms add up to 35.1% of the 422 habitable rooms proposed within this scheme. The table at the bottom of this slide demonstrates that a similar approach to the calculation of habitable rooms and the split of habitable rooms was undertaken in the previous approval for this site. I will return to this table at the end of the presentation to allow councillors to reflect on this during questions. The next slide illustrates this consistent approach to the breakdown of habitable rooms. On the left-hand side, the affordable units and room split is shown with 3 bedrooms for 1-bed dwellings, 4 habitable rooms for 2-bed, and 5 habitable rooms for 3-bed dwellings. This is consistent across both the consented and proposed schemes. This same breakdown with 2 habitable rooms for 1-bedroom dwellings, 3 habitable rooms for 2-bedroom dwellings, and 4 habitable rooms for 3-bedroom dwellings within the private dwellings is shown for both the consented and proposed schemes on the right-hand side. The next slide provides a breakdown on the habitable floor space across tenure types. This shows that a similar level of affordable rental floor space would be provided, an increase in the floor space for intermediate products, i.e. the shared ownership, and an increase in the private habitable floor space. Again, I can return to this slide at the end to address any questions. In summary, regarding the affordable housing and unit mix, it is noted that the total number of units remains the same as previously approved, being 149 dwellings. The total number of affordable housing units has increased by 1 up to 41. There has been an increase in the total affordable housing provision when measured on a floor space basis. The habitable room calculation is in line with the previously consented scheme. And finally, 35% of the habitable rooms will be affordable in line with the Section 106 agreement. Therefore, this approach is considered to be acceptable. In terms of other matters, the principle of the development of the site remains supportable. The residential density remains unchanged from that previously approved. The impact upon the listed Red Lion public house remains acceptable. The amenity impacts have been fully reassessed and are largely equivalent to those previously deemed acceptable. The transport assessment remains unchanged. The energy conditions have been revised to reflect the updated energy assessment. And lastly, no objections have been received to this proposal. In summary, the proposal is considered to be acceptable having regard to the fact that the development of a 149 unit scheme has previously been deemed acceptable through the previous approval of this site. The proposed minor material amendment aims to enhance the scheme through improved materiality, transferred height, whilst improving entrances and services. The overall height of the development has been reduced. The principal, density, transport, impact upon the Red Lion public house, and waste remain unchanged and acceptable. The unit mix and affordable housing have been slightly altered to reflect the revised building design. Having regard to the previous deferral of this application, this presentation has also sought to clarify the total number of habitable rooms and the proportion of these which will be provided as affordable housing. Importantly, it is noted that the total number of affordable housing units will increase, the total level of floor space dedicated to affordable housing will increase, and the proposal would continue to provide 35% of habitable rooms as affordable housing. Again, lastly, it is noted that no objections have been received to this proposal. So As such, it is recommended that the Planning Committee grant approval to the minor material amendment, subject to a deed of variation and the conditions attached to this report. I'm happy to answer any questions should you have any.
Thank you, Ryan. Do you want to turn your mic off, please? Right. Councillor Stafford, you indicated.
Thank you very much. And apologies, I wasn't at the last committee in July. So if these questions have already been answered, I apologise. But just for my clarification, just three. In terms of the commercial unit, it says it's been slightly reduced, but can I confirm that it's 40% reduction in the commercial, well, 37% reduction in the floor space. So that's quite a significant reduction. In terms of the height, in the increase in block C, in some places it's referred to as 2 stories, and you referred to that in your presentation, but in other places it's 1.5 floors. Could you just confirm the exact increase in height, please? And then finally, on the housing tenure, specifically on the 3-bedroom properties, in the table 4, it looks like there's a reduction in the affordable, in terms of 3-bed properties, there's a reduction in the affordable unit mix. There's the same affordable rented and a reduction in shared ownership. But in the total, it goes up by 6. Does that mean that there's been an increase in the private, in the private blocks? Is that where we get a +6 from, given that we've got a -8 in affordable and shared ownership?
I'll take Councillor Nebraska. There's quite a lot there, but I'll take Councillor Nebraska, and
Thank you.
it might be.
For clarification, since we're on topic of housing and housing mix, I'd like to have clarification the rationale by adding 1 shared ownership, but actually reducing 4 of the shared ownership units from 3 to 1. So the rationale and the justification by the planning officer, by yourself, for accepting that in affordable housing. So whilst it might be tick boxing the rooms and everything, but you're effectively reducing the the quantity of larger units for shared ownership. Also, unless I've missed something, it doesn't specify the change of the amenity space from the approved to the proposed. It just states what's currently being proposed, and it still falls short. So it'd be interesting to find out what it was approved. And also, in one of your tables, you put up, which is not actually in the report, unless again I missed something, the floor space for the private housing is greatly increased. Why wasn't the increase proportionate across both private and affordable housing units? Because the affordable housing unit increase was minimal, was minuscule. I think it's single figures, whilst the floor space for the private housing, I think, went up by about 500. What I think it was either square feet or square meter, I can't remember what it was, the unit. So it's clarification and the justification behind it. Thank you.
Okay, there's quite a lot there, so I'll stop there for a minute and I'll take others. Right, have you got those? I've made a note as well.
I'll just run through them in order. In regards to the commercial unit, it's not a decrease of 37%, it's a decrease of 37 square meters.
It's the same. It's 100 square meters.
Sorry, I don't have the plan in front of me, but it was deemed during the assessment to still allow for a viable commercial space fronting Southall High Street as a result of that. In relation to the height, I am aware that at different times it's referred to as 1.5 stories or as 2 stories. The 1.5 was a part of the justification provided by the applicant, and that results from the fact that the top story of both buildings is set back but in actuality, I guess the correct way to say it is 2 stories. There's a 2-story reduction and 2-story increase, but both top stories are set back. The third question related to, has there been an increase in the private 3-bedroom dwellings, given that there is an increase, but there's a decrease in the affordable unit mix? And the answer to that is yes, there's an increase in the 3-bedroom units that are proposed to be provided as private dwellings. Then I think the next question was from Councillor Dobroska, relating to the change in the unit mix within the affordable housing provision as a whole. Council's housing team did raise some concern regarding the loss of 2-bedroom dwellings in favour of 1-bedroom dwellings, specifically within the affordable rental component, which was a loss of 2-bedroom and a replacement with 2 1-bedroom. They were less concerned with the shared ownership proportion. Given the fact that the building footprint and design of the building was fundamentally changing, and this resulted in an overall change to the unit mix, the change to the makeup of the affordable housing was deemed to be acceptable. And this was also reflected through the comments received from the GLA. In terms of the private amenity space, it may actually be helpful if I could try and find that in front of me. I think because I don't have those figures directly.
Communal, it says it's short in the communal space as well.
What page are you referring to?
At page 21. This is now
21 of 44.
Yeah, 21 of 44.
So I think the main response I would make to that shortfall in communal open space is that this actually forms an improvement upon the previously approved scheme, because I don't believe the previous scheme provided much in terms of communal open space except for that available at ground floor level. And this shortfall was deemed to be acceptable given the site's proximity to Southall Park. The new scheme actually has 2 above ground private amenity terraces available for use by residents. And this was reflected through an amendment to one of the later conditions that allowed, I think it was condition condition 33 was actually amended from the previous approval because there are 2 private terraces available. Ultimately, the shortfall in communal open space was deemed to be acceptable given the site sits directly adjacent to Southall Park. And then in terms of the total floor space, I can get that table back up in front of us to review.
Obviously, just that the changes to the amenity areas are at the ground floor level, and it's a consequence of the cycle stores that were external being moved inside of buildings. So the changes are modest, but they are a slight improvement above the approved consented scheme. So they've just taken away some of the structures that were in that amenity space. So it's a bit better and a bit more practical.
Use your mic, please.
That's right.
It's not for me, it's for people at home.
And the last one about the floor space, which the private housing, the habitable floor space for private housing has increased significantly more, whilst the affordable space has actually slightly dropped, according to that table.
We can get the table back up again, please.
Yes, so as you can see, you are correct that the total floor space proportionally within the private dwellings has increased. And so that means proportionally there is a lower amount of affordable and intermediate product. However, council has deemed it to be acceptable given there is an increase in the intermediate product. There is an increase in the total number of affordable housing units, and the proposal continues to provide the 35% that's required by the legal agreement.
Any other questions? Councillor Martin.
Could we go to the table that you had up that gave the square meterage rather than habitable rooms? That one, yeah. So based on this one,
Can you
can
speak
you
in
hear
the
me?
microphone?
It's
I can hear
streaking
you,
it.
but I'm not
It's
sure everyone
streaking it.
at home.
Okay, sorry. So based on this one, there's not a lot of difference between the two. However, the percentage of affordable is actually only 27%, isn't it? So if you did it on the basis of square meterage, it's 27%, yeah? So that was the bit that we were trying to get at last time. So we were a bit skeptical about 35%. We seem to be playing about with what's a habitable room or open plan, etc. But this to me comes to the heart of why we were having that big debate. But the reality is that if you did it on square meterage, it's only 27% affordable. That's what your side seems to be saying. And that's the sort of sense of, I think, of what we were getting at the last planning meeting. And then if I did it just on bedrooms, I think, I was just trying to calculate and then I realised I'd gone wrong, but I think on the first proposal, just going to do that again, one sec. I think there would have been, I think it feels, I might have got this wrong, but I think I've got it as 94 bedrooms. And the second proposal is 64 bedrooms. In the if you take away all that fussing about habitable rooms and just look at bedrooms, then that's what it seems. That seems to be the difference. So if I take the approved ones, so 14 one bedrooms, 2 18, so double that to 36, 3 8 bedrooms. That's 24. I just yes, that's 24. On the other scheme, you'd have one bedrooms 20, 2 lots, 2 times 16 is 32, 4 times 3 is 12. So adding those together, the second one is 64, and actually got the wrong. I think it's maybe I've got it wrong actually. Is it 74? Yeah, 74. Sorry. So there's a reduction in 10 bedrooms between the two schemes on the affordable side. That's what I'm reading this as. So perhaps you can clarify that. Yeah.
I think the approach that I've taken in the assessment of this application is seeking to provide a consistent assessment in line with what was previously approved by council. And in doing that, the previous officer and the Section 106 agreement determined that the affordable portion has a slightly higher proportion of habitable rooms, and that proportion of habitable rooms includes the kitchen and the dining room. So my assessment hasn't compared the number of bedrooms previously approved with the total number of proposed bedrooms.
So it isn't necessarily about this one application, but this one application has highlighted the fact that you know, there are issues about using habitable rooms as a point of comparison, and if we can do that, and it appears to look like we've maintained 35%, but actually it's only really 27% square meterage, and actually the number of affordable rooms seems to have gone down. If you look in bedrooms, you know, I think it's something we need to look at very seriously, and it's not just about this application. And I appreciate you've used the standards that we typically use, and just on this one, we've just sort of picked up the fact that there was something not reading right, which is why we asked it to be deferred. I think we're clearer now on why we were worried about it last time.
I think that was more of a statement than a question at the end there. Councillor Condon.
Yeah, just I guess really to follow up on that, because I was here when we discussed this the first time, and I guess it was, you know, me that was raising a lot of questions about the proportion of affordable housing, because I just couldn't understand, you know, how we got this development. It was obviously bigger. That the you know, the market housing had generally increased in size, whereas the affordable housing had, on the whole, decreased, you know, slightly in size. There were, you know, 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom houses that were lost and replaced by 1-bedroom housing. So I thought, you know, how could this be? And we've still got the same proportion of affordable housing. Now, you know, I understand, you know, how that is the case now, and it, you know, it's because of the way that affordable rooms are determined, and in particular, you know, if in a place you have an open plan living area with a kitchen and a you know, kitchen and a sitting room area combined in one, that is counted as a single habitable room. If you take exactly the same, you know, space and you just put a partition down it so that the kitchen area, you know, has a wall, it becomes a separate room. And so then, you know, you haven't got any more space, but you've got 2 habitable rooms. So, you know, you've got an affordable house that has, or an affordable flat that has 1 bedroom, and it has the kitchen, the sitting and dining area partitioned. It has exactly the same number of habitable rooms as a 2-bedroom flat that is at market price, but where the kitchen and the living area have been combined into an open plan area. Now, the second one is obviously really a bigger flat. It's got, you know, it's got an extra bedroom, which is the giveaway, and the you know, the dining area is, you know, is open plan, but it's not smaller. But the habitable room, you know, the habitable room calculation kind of, you know, weights things. Now, I just thought, you know, and so in the case of the changes between the 2 applications, you know, we've got more of these, you know, more of these open plan areas that have been converted into separate kitchen and sitting areas in the affordable housing, and in the you know, market housing, they're all open plan. So it just struck me as, and it still strikes me as, I understand now how the calculations have been done, and I understand that they're technically correct and consistent with the approach that was taken in the first application. But I do still think that we've been shortchanged slightly here in terms of, you know, the proportion of affordable housing that we get. And we need to be, you know, far sharper in terms of picking this up in applications and on pushing back on developers. And I was interested, I thought, well, surely, you know, this is an obvious kind of loophole, you know, there must be something in planning policy about this. So I went to the, you know, to the supplementary planning guidance for the London plan. There's a supplementary planning document on affordable housing and viability, and it dealt with precisely, you know, this sort of situation. And it said that, you know, in calculation of habitable rooms, that they should be overall, on average, they should be of the same size in the affordable and the market proportions of the development. If they're not of the same size, then, you know, you should look at other measures to judge the percentage of affordability. And in particular, you know, it highlighted the proportion of floor space. And as we see, you know, now we've seen the figures that we only get, you know, 27% of floor space that is affordable, as opposed to 73% that is market rent. And that is a slight reduction of what there was in the original consented scheme, which only had 29% in the first place. So I do think, you know, we need to pay attention to that planning guidance and what it says. And we do need to be making sure that you know, that we, yeah, that the affordable element of housing is really 35%, you know, and that room sizes that we're comparing like with like. Because I think in this example, we're kind of comparing, you know, we've got affordable apples and market sale oranges, and they're not the same. And that's, you know, it's just a problem. And we just, you know, I think you know, it's a problem in this application, and it could well be a problem in lots of other applications as well. So we just need to not let developers kind of pull the wool over our eyes in a way with this sort of thing in the future.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't think there was a question, I think, at that point. Yes, yeah. Councillor Daraska.
Thank
Is this
you.
a question?
A question, yeah, just still a clarification question. Sorry, I was just trying to comprehend what Councillor Connell was saying and what the officer said earlier about the sort of the definition of this housing. So are you basically saying that a wall in the affordable housing unit, effectively creating an extra habitable room, is the only difference that changes the percentage compared to the private dwellings? The private dwellings obviously have an open area, open plan setup. So a wall in the smaller affordable housing units effectively creates a tick box for the 35% habitable rooms.
Thank you, Dee. Alex, would you like to respond?
As I understand it, that can be done in relation to calculating the habitable rooms. If a space can be subdivided and it's over 11.5 square meters, then that should change the calculations in terms of habitable rooms. And I think I commented on that in the last committee. So any very large space, whether it's open plan, if that can be reasonably subdivided, even if it's not shown to be subdivided, it should you know, you should be able to calculate the number of habitable rooms.
Okay, so on the basis of that,
hold on, let me clarify. So what you're saying is, even if there is a wall or not a wall, it should count as 2 in essence.
That's how it should be calculated.
So on that basis, if the increase of the private floor space has gone up a huge chunk, according to that table we just discussed earlier, so mathematically, if the private space has gone up, looking at the numbers of the private habitable rooms, that means there are a lot of open plan in the private side. Therefore, I'd be very surprised if the increase in floor space has gone up on private tremendously, that those rooms, the open plan rooms, must be over 11 square meter criteria, as you mentioned. Therefore, why are they not calculated as 2 rooms? Therefore, they'll change the 35% calculation. Pure maths. Basically, I don't believe a 35% is correct.
I think the main way that I would respond to that is that, yes, you may be correct, but I'd like to go back to the fact that I've tried to provide a consistent assessment, consistent with what was previously approved on this site. And so the previous officer and the previous committee that approved this scheme allowed for the affordable housing to be proportionally divided in this same manner. And I think in terms of the assessment of this section 73, some weight has to be given to that.
With all due respect, you have increased the private floor space tremendously. Where has this floor space gone? Where has it gone into? Bigger rooms? Because I can't see any extra volume put in terms of units. So it must be in room sizes.
Was the original layouts, were they correct? Just try to ask a question.
The original layouts in the previously approved scheme, as far as I'm aware.
Calculations.
As far as I'm aware, I wasn't involved in the proposal at that point in time.
Something's not right. Something's not right.
I don't hear any more questions from the officers. So if there's any further debate to be had, then please indicate.
Yes, so obviously I've come to this afresh because I wasn't sitting in the previous application. My view is that the 3 questions I asked really were related to the 3 concerns I have about this proposal. First of all, I think the reduction in commercial space is a problem, a significant problem. As the committee members are well aware, I think the height of this building is going up. I know it's coming down overall, but changing the height of the blocks would have concerned me. I think the fact that there have been no objections from residents and none from the ward councillors, who I accept know their wards better than me, I'm more reassured on that, because the ward councillors would have objected if they thought there was some problem. But I do think that the housing tenure issue is a problem. I think the reduction in 3-bed properties in the affordable housing and the overall reduction in the 2-bed properties across the scheme is a real problem, and an increase in single dwellings is a massive problem. So I think, for me, the mix of housing tenure in this proposal is materially worse than the one in the previous one. And I think on balance, the reduction in commercial unit and the change in tenure, I think would push me towards voting against this.
That's the Bristol.
Yeah, it's to follow on from what Councillor Stafford said about the mix of the different tenures. Is that, I think, from what I remember in the July meeting, this is what one of our points of deferral was the reduction in the 2- and 3-bedroomed dwellings, an increase in 1-bedroom dwellings. If you speak to, I know it's not our job as planning committee about selling or renting out properties, but if you speak to any estate agent now, they will all tell you that the market for one-bedroomed places to buy and to rent is saturated. So I cannot see why there is an increase in one-bedroom places and decrease in 2- and 3-bedroom places. Now, the pandemic, you know, I know we're sick of hearing about it, has fundamentally changed the space that people want and require for properties. If you have a look at the land registry, the properties that are selling are the ones with space, houses and flats with an increased amount of bedrooms. So I can't see the rationale for decreasing the amount of 2- and 3-bedroom dwellings and increasing 1-bedroom dwellings. So on that basis, really, I'm minded to reject the application.
Let me respond. Well, I'm glad we don't take what estate agents say as read, because I wouldn't personally. And I know that I think it's 66% of the people on our housing waiting list are looking for 1- and 2-bedroom flats. So, and that is a fact. So, what estate agents say is selling, I don't really care what they say personally. And we are looking at the difference between the scheme before and the scheme as it is now, not a new scheme in front of us tonight. So there's 2 things I'd like to point out to the committee. Councillor Burke, I've heard from Councillor Dabrowska several times.
Actually, I wasn't there the last time, but the scheme seems to be materially worse, and materially worse in terms of our own plan and the London plan. And in terms of my understanding of it, we do have grounds to turn it down, even though we're only voting on the bit that we have today, because it's materially worse and because the plan gives us the ability to do that on the basis that the floor space is worse as well.
I think we've debated enough now. I think you have. Well, okay. Councillor Dabrowska, debate away.
Thank you. I'm not going to reiterate what's already been mentioned, but I agree with the being unhappy with the housing mix and flat size changes across the board. Also, I have to say I don't have confidence in the way it's not the way the methods being, the way the rooms have been calculated. It's how it's been presented in terms of what we discussed, the clarification, the 11 square meter criteria. I don't have confidence in that, so I'm minded to turn it down.
I think that's a wider picture. There's a wider thing that this development has brought to the fore. I'm not sure this development that is the what I should say is the one that well, no, this is the one, and I think the officers are picking up what the committee is saying, that we will be scrutinising not just the sizes, not just the numbers of bedrooms, but the numbers of habitable rooms and what they mean in terms of private and
real numbers, real space.
Of course, I wasn't talking about pretend numbers, Councillor Dabrowska. I said numbers. So I think that has gone into the. I'm sure that Alex has picked that up from the committee, that we will be scrutinising all developments going forward in terms of numbers of habitable rooms, numbers of bedrooms, floor areas, and saying that they all add up together. So with that in mind, and I don't see any more indications, I'm going to go to the vote. Sorry, Councillor Martin.
I just want to come back to one comment I made earlier on, which I think it is the case that the first version of this, there were 74 bedrooms, affordable bedrooms, and the second version there's 64 affordable bedrooms. So that is a significant difference. Yeah, I mean, we're having the debate now, I know, but you know, I'm just saying that I think we did approve the previous scheme, so in fact some of the calculations, officers quite rightly said, the calculations that were made But looking at the two side by side, I think you can see, if you look at things in terms of bedrooms, that has reduced.
That's fine. I'm going to ask the officer, is that the correct numbers?
To be honest, I didn't assess or compare the bedroom numbers of the previously approved scheme with the bedroom numbers of this scheme. The habitable rooms formed the key consideration in calculating the affordable housing provision.
Materiality, it's materiality.
Listen, I'm not, I think listening to not knowing the numbers, I think we might be in the realms of deferring this again. Well,
Quite rightly saying they didn't judge it on that basis.
well,
They
okay.
didn't judge it on that basis, but
I would personally like to know what previous ones compared to this from the, I know, I don't distrust you, but I'm saying it's the officers and they should be writing this in the report for us to make a determination, not us calculating ourselves over the period of the, will you stop interrupting, Councillor Dabrowska? Yes, I'm saying that we've got a choice here. We either vote on it tonight or we defer it to get the right numbers in the report properly, which I am going to propose that we defer it to get the right numbers in the report this time. And we have all numbers at the right floor space, compare apples with apples, and we bring it back again. So with that, sorry, if I propose, so if once I propose it, sorry, once it's proposed, I have to go to, if someone seconds it, then I have to go to the vote. No, there's no more debate. So I'm going to propose a deferral to get the right numbers in the right boxes, and we can actually look at them properly. So all those in favour of deferral, please show. I've got to vote for my own thing, haven't I? Right. Okay. I think, has everyone voted? Sorry. Okay. All those in favour, keep your hands up. That's all bar one. All those against? One against. There's no abstentions. Right. Okay. I think the steer is that we can actually make a decision on the numbers in front of us rather than we'd calculate the numbers in the committee, etc. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry, I haven't got any other business. So thank you very much. The next meeting is in a month's time. What's the date of the next meeting? Before you all go, I'll let you know. 4 weeks' time. I'm not sure about the day. 20th of October is the next meeting. Thank you very much.